Hi, I'm Mary, a librarian and book reviewer with a focus on stories written for kids, tweens, and teens. Today, I am joined by Diane Namm, who has been a storyteller her whole life. She's authored over 65 children's books, YA teen romance novels, adult nonfiction books, and feature-length screenplays. Diane has also written and directed stage plays and short films. But at this moment, being Nana is the thing she enjoys the most. Welcome, Diane.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about your newest picture book, What Happens After?
Sure. I would love to. It's now my favorite book. Um, it's a book I wrote because after our family experienced a number of different losses, and the children in our family who always turn to books whenever they're looking for some answers or whenever they're looking for some comfort, there just weren't really any. That we liked or that we thought were appropriate. And there are a couple. Is my daughter really liked the rabbit list and the rabbit listened, and also the invisible string. But I felt that there was just a real dearth of content for kids and adults, to be honest. But it's mainly for kids at this point. Um, to talk about their grief and their loss and what happens after you lose someone you love. And so, consequently, I wrote one. And then I decided that rather than try to sell it to a mainstream publisher, since I assumed, rightly or wrongly, that the reason that there aren't many books out there about this is because mainstream publishers don't really want to deal with that subject. So I decided to publish it myself, which it's only one of two books that I've ever published myself. But I felt pretty strongly about doing this one too. So I wanted it to be what I wanted it to be. And consequently, I assembled a team of really, truly talented and professional people. Simone Kaplan was my editor. Um, Semidar Megid was my art director. And of course, Laura Yeager was the illustrator. And I truly believe that they brought the best out of that manuscript, better than anyone else could have. And so we ended up with What Happens After in its current form.
Did you have a sense of what the book would look like before it came together?
Well, I always envisioned a certain type of illustration, uh, an embracing of all people who suffer loss, because, as I've said many times, loss is universal. Grief is personal and individual, but loss is universal. And I wanted anyone reading it to sort of feel like they were involved in the process themselves and see themselves in the book. And so Laura and Semidar and Simone just executed it perfectly.
That's so lovely. And I know that this is a picture book and it's kind of geared towards children to some degree, but do you find that there is a part of the book that speaks to adults as well?
Well, yes. I mean, in all the writing I've ever done, I've always tried to address the adult sensibility as well as the child sensibility because, usually it's an adult who may be reading the book and you want them to enjoy it as well on their level. Um, and I'm not comparing myself, and I don't in any way think that I am like Shel Silverstein, but he was my model in The Giving Tree because I think The Giving Tree is a book for all ages. And I wanted What Happens After to have that same kind of appeal.
I think that you have done a really beautiful job with that. And I especially like how the text and the illustrations pair really nicely. And there's also a story happening in the illustrations that isn't depicted in the words in the book. Did you have any say in that as it was coming together?
Sure, it's a collaboration. I mean, I had certain things in mind, and Laura is a very talented illustrator, and she had certain things in mind. And Semidar is a very talented art director, and she had certain things in mind, and so did Simone as the director of everything. So I think we just all sort of brought our best collaborative tools together and created what was there. So I think that there were certain stories lines behind the scenes that mattered to me, like the grandmother and the granddaughter, and the missing of the grandfather, and the missing of the dog. And then I think Laura and everybody else brought their who they were missing to the sensibility. And so when we had our conversations about it and we saw the sketches Laura was doing, we all had input into the different aspects of what was happening in the pictures.
That's a really unique approach to building a picture book, I feel like. Sometimes there's the author has their own opinions and then the illustrator, and like sometimes they come together and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they never even speak in the process of building the book. And I love that you had this collaborative approach. It really comes through in the story that there's so many different sides to grief, as you've described, and that anybody reading it is likely to have some sort of connection to the story.
Sure. And I think that I mean, I've worked with publishers most of my career. Um, and it depends on the editor you have, and of course, but there's certain protocols that mainstream publishers have to follow, and I don't. So for this, we just brought our all of our sensibilities together to do it.
So you've written a lot of things. You're a very prolific writer. Have you been a writer your whole life, or was this something you fell into?
Uh, yes, and both. I have been a writer all my life because that is what I always turned to, even as a kid. Um, when I first started out in publishing, I was an editor, a children's book editor. And along with being a children's book editor comes a lot of rewriting and writing. And so I kind of segued into full-time writing when I left New York and I left mainstream publishing as an editor. And then I just took on projects as a writer, just because Los Angeles is less publishing heavy than New York is. And so I just proceeded to then develop other forms of writing that I was interested in doing, while still maintaining my contacts and my willingness to do projects with publishers back in New York. So I've been writing a long time. I'm really old.
But I also love that you've written for kids and for grown-ups. Do you have a preference, or do you find that you get certain things from each age group that you write for?
Well, my first preference has always been children's books because that's where I started out. Um, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be an adult novel fiction editor and that I was going to find the next F. Scott Fitzgerald. But that was when I was a kid. And then when I found the job that I did find was in children's book editing at Grosset and Dunlap. And kind of from there, the trajectory was everybody I met from that point on um, became part of the journey that's made me into the writer that I am today.
I love that. As you're putting your books together in general, or for this book in particular, do you do any sort of research or preparation or storyboarding as you're coming up with your ideas?
uh, Again, yes and no. I don't storyboard. I literally cannot draw. It would not be helpful to anybody for me to do that. But I can articulate what it is I want to see on the page. And I do so only with deference to the talents of the illustrator that I'm working with, um, because all ideas are welcome until we decide on what the best idea is. Um, I don't. I don't think that I have a preference. I think that if I could do children's books forever, I would be happy doing that. But I am also involved and love to do all the other things that are involved in it. And I don't do a lot of research for things that don't require research. This wasn't a research thing. This was a very personal story. This is a very personal reason I did this. I wanted my kids to have something from me that dealt with this, that was positive, and that they could, that would both validate the grief they feel or they would feel, and would help them find ways to move forward. Um, Still, as the book says, living their lives with joy and sometimes sadness. But it would be something that they would know came from me. One of the reviewers on Instagram said, the book was like a big hug. And I love that because that's true. That's what I wanted. Sometimes when you're hurting and when you're sad and when there's grief, there are no really good words. But if you can hug someone and make them feel loved at the moment and taken care of, that's what the book was meant to do. So I thought it was a really apropos description of it.
It is. And I appreciate also that your book is non-denominational. So it's just talking about the grief in a way that is accessible to folks no matter what faith they happen to have. And that death and loss is an inevitable part of life. So there's going to be a reason to have it no matter whose life it happens to be.
Well, I realize that there are lots of cultural and religious ways of dealing with death, but I didn't really think that was my job. Um, I think the book can be a springboard to conversations in families that want to have that conversation as well. But I think that the feelings on a very human level kind of supersede culture and religion, and that I just really wanted something that dealt with the human suffering that was involved and the human choices you make when you want to live your life and move forward.
Absolutely. What was it like for you the first time that you held this book in your hands when it was all done?
Honestly, the thrill of getting a book that you've published is never gets old. I have I have been most fortunate in that I have been able to receive copies of most of the things that I have written. And honestly, the first time, it's just as good as the first time it ever happened. It just, there's something so thrilling about seeing the words that you have written come to life in a book or even in a play or a film. It's a remarkable experience. And I am grateful every day that I get to be able to do that.
It is really special. Have you been able to share the book with your family?
Sure. Well, I mean, my family is consulted even before the book is finished. I show my family my writing so that I get a sense of what they think, because although they're very loving, they're very honest. So they would tell me if something, needed addressing. And so I kind of rely on their thoughts and their feelings and their responses in order to sort of guide my writing journey on any project.
You mentioned that some of the elements of this book were more personal to you, and so I'm guessing also personal to your family. Did they have any input as far as how those stories played out, or did they have any reaction to them once they saw them come together?
Um, the input was simply just having lived their lives. They didn't, you know, I determined who would be the characters that were featured as lost. And um, I can't say that I didn't use real life as a guide. The dog that dies happens to look a lot like the dog that my daughter had and who died. Um, and the fact that someone lost a wife, someone lost a child, someone lost a dog, someone lost a grandparent, just all seemed like the most universal of experiences. Um, and their reaction actually surprised me because although the story made me cry when I did it, you're involved in it, so you think, okay, that's just me. But it actually made everyone who read the manuscript cry. And I didn't mean to do that. And at first, so I meant it to make someone feel better, not worse. But as my daughter explained to me, that they were good tears because they were tears of recognition and tears of identification and then sort of tears of acceptance. And so I felt a little better that I made them cry because I really didn't mean to.
Well, and sometimes when you're feeling sad, just the permission to feel sad is what you need to hear at the time.
I think you're right. I think that's what she was saying.
I think that's beautiful. And I think that this book really encapsulates the love and the tenderness that come from a loving relationship that ends up moving forward into the next.
The
Um,
next phase, it's true.
yes. Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that because honestly, I don't think a relationship with someone that you've lost ends permanently just because someone is now no longer in your physical sphere. I do believe that you carry that person with you, and whatever influence that person had has now become part of you. And you carry that forward, and that means that the relationship continues. I'm not suggesting that you have to stay, in a closed room and only talk to the person who's not there. But they're in your head and they're in your heart, and they inform the decisions and the things and the feelings that you have going forward, whether they're there or not. And I just think that's important to remember because as long as that's the case, then there's still a small part of them that's alive. At least that's how I feel. And I think that that brings comfort to people who lose someone.
I think so too. What advice would you give, especially being such a prolific published author? What advice would you give to folks who are considering embarking along this path, whether for children's or adult books?
Well, I'm a big believer in and anybody who wants to should write. I find writing for myself has always been therapeutic and cathartic. Um, I've just been lucky enough to be in a position to have it published. Um, I'm not suggesting that everyone become a published author, but there is no reason not to write if that is something that moves you. The same thing is true of art. The same thing is true of music. The same thing is true of any creative endeavor, whether it's making pots or it's crocheting or knitting, anything that allows your creativity to be directed in something positive is a good thing. And if you want to write, you should write. And you shouldn't worry about it being edited. You shouldn't worry about whether anyone else is going to like it. I mean, honestly, the one thing that is the through line throughout all of my work is it's always been something that I liked. And I like lots of different things. So, I mean, if I'm going to retell a classic, I'm going to retell a classic that I like. Um, if I'm going to talk about, do a story or a film or a play, it's going to be something that I like or a subject I care about. And I think that is the best thing to inform your writing, is that it be something that you care about. They always say, write what you know. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting write what you care about. You can learn things about it as you are writing it if that's what you want to do, but you have to care about it in order to be able to stick with the writing. Because if you don't care about it, then no one else will either.
That's true. And if you're going to spend the hours and hours and hours writing something, you might as well like it. If it's not
It's
something you like,
true.
why are you doing? Because it's not
It's
easy.
it's not, and it's true. It's a very big time commitment, and you got to be involved in something you like. And I'm not saying that the writing process is simple. I'm not saying that there won't be times when you look at what you've written, that's really terrible. But as long as you do it and you enjoy doing it, then that's what you should be doing.
That's great advice. Diane, do you have any other projects in the works that you're comfortable sharing with us?
I'm always writing something. Sometimes I just take a project because it's interesting to me. It's not necessarily something that is near and dear to my heart. But I just finished doing a little tarot card, a Lovecraft tarot card set because I really like Lovecraft and I love his stories, even though they're sort of creepy and horrible and science fiction like. So, I mean, that's a project that I think is going to be out if it isn't already. But yeah, I'm always writing something. I think that if you're a writer, then you're always writing.
That's true. Fun. That sounds completely different from this and also very intriguing. I'm excited to check it out.
Yep, it is completely different from this. Nothing to do with it at all.
Yeah. But how freeing to be able to write whatever it is that moves you at the moment. That's great.
Lucky to have the opportunity to do a lot of things, and always grateful that I've been asked to do them when I have been asked. But I'm very happy when I choose to do the things I do on my own too.
Absolutely. Yes. So, Diane, I've asked you several questions already today, but what question did I not ask you that you wish I had?
What's the other book that I self-published?
What is it?
It's called Latkes and Lefse. And again, this was another book that was very personal to me. So I didn't really, to be fair, try to publish it in mainstream publishing. This was another one and the first one that I wanted to just be in charge of. And Latkes and Lefse is basically about how much we have in common as people, because even though it seems like we're all different with all these different cultural events and different ethnicities and different food favorites and things like that, that the point is that we really are all very much the same when it comes to celebrating and loving to celebrate and being and enjoying the foods that the celebrations engender. And so I wanted that message of universality as well, and that we all have more in common than we have apart. And so, again, informed by my family, I wrote Latkes and Lefse so that they could celebrate both Hanukkah and Christmas together.
How fun. I'm seeing a theme here in the universality message, especially in these two self-published books, making them celebrate the things that unite humanity rather than things that divide them.
Exactly, and I don't know if that's a topic that mainstream publishing would be interested in or not, but I firmly believe in it. So those two books became my own projects.
That's so wonderful. Where can folks go to find out more about you and the things that you have coming up?
Well, you can always go to diannamm.com. I try really hard to keep that current. And then that can lead you to all the things that I've done and that I do and that are available. You can always just type in my name to Amazon, or barnesandnoble.com or bookshop.org, and my name comes up with many of the books that I've written in the past, as well as what happens after. Um, and so I'm only on two social media sites. I'm not that I'm not that big of a fan about that. So I do use LinkedIn, and I will post and promote things on LinkedIn and on Instagram as well. But that's it. DianneNamm.com, LinkedIn, Amazon, and occasionally Instagram.
Great. Well, listeners, if what happens after sounds like a great fit for you or for someone you know, I hope you look for it wherever you get your books. And Diane, thank you again so much for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.